I hereby call the meeting of the Public Safety Committee to order. Due to the declaration of a state of emergency, all committee members are participating in this meeting virtually. For virtual meetings, committee members will be muted until asked to be heard. When there is a vote, it will be necessary to take a roll call vote. A committee member will then be recognized and will raise their hand and state their vote. Committee members that are present are Councilmember Jeff McIntosh. Thank you for being here today. We have Councilmember John Larson. We have Councilmember Annette Scipio, who's not on the committee, but who's always a faithful. I want to take a moment and recognize one young lady fairly quickly who's no longer with us, and that's Mayor Pro Temp Vivian H. Burke, who served with distinction for many, many, many years. She was a chair of the Public Safety Committee and a member, and we just pause for a second in her honor. Thank you, Ms. Burke, for your service to our community. Items on the consent agenda are unanimously approved with one sweeping motion, unless a member of the council or the committee wishes something on the consent agenda to be pulled for consideration. Members of the committee should be pulled for consideration. If there are none, I'd entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to pull number C3.
C3. Any other items? If not, I'd entertain a motion to approve the balance.
Motion to approve the balance.
Second.
Motion, is there a second? Properly second. All in favor, please say aye. Well, Councilmember Larson.
Aye.
Councilmember McIntosh.
Aye.
And aye for me. So the consent agenda is approved with the exception of item C3. And Madam Secretary, if you could read that item, please.
The city manager to enter into a temporary intergovernmental agreement for law enforcement services and preparation for, during, and after the 2020 Republican National Convention.
Councilmember Larson is recognized.
As I understand this, we're going to send 100 of our patrolmen down to Charlotte 3 or 4 days to participate in the protection of people on a Republican convention. For that, we're going to pay our officers to be there. Is that basically it? Because I have a question about the cost of this. If we're covering PPE, particularly with the virus going on, are our officers going to be protected? And the second thing is, do we have per diem for them while they're down there? Is that being paid for the meals while they're there? Or we have to pick that up?
Good evening, Chairman Taylor, members of the committee. This is Tasha Logan Ford, Assistant City Manager. I would ask that we have Captain Mike Weaver. He is on the call. And if he would speak to this item and address the questions as posed by Councilmember Larson.
Captain Weaver, you have the floor, sir. Do you need the item repeated, or do you have the conceptual of the question?
I do not need to repeat it. Thank you very much for offering.
Thank you.
Public Safety Chair Taylor and other council members, good evening. As you know, in 2012, the Winston-Salem Police Department supplied 100 officers to assist with the DNC in Charlotte. We have the RNC coming this year, and there's been some conversations taking place over the last couple of years where a similar request made from Charlotte was fielded by our agency. At this time, we have received an intergovernmental agreement asking for 100 officers to go down to assist. That paperwork has been submitted. There's been some items worked out between the agencies to our satisfaction. They have been reviewed by the city attorney. Basically, to answer your question, Councilmember Larson, the 100 officers will be going down at no cost to the city whatsoever. We will be reimbursed completely. That includes salary, benefits, travel, room, board, food, and lodging. So there would be no cost to the city of Winston-Salem at all.
And what measures are being taken to protect them while they're down there, in case we have the virus still going, which we probably will?
Yes, sir. Very good question. The topic of PPE, excuse me, is still taking place, but I'm sure it will be provided. If it's not, I'll ensure it is. There is a clause within the intergovernmental agreement that specifically says that the Winston-Salem Police Department reserves the right to recall some or all of its assigned officers based upon the public safety needs of the city of Winston-Salem.
Right.
So I want to make sure everybody knows that. We are going to take care of home. The officers we are sending down, we will still be able to deliver the full range of services that we do anyway.
Maybe this is for the city manager, but online officers, patrol out in the patrol officers, here we short currently.
I believe, good evening, Mayor and members of the City Council. I believe that we're short maybe somewhere in the 50 to 60 officers.
That's actually out in patrol cars, or is that administrative as well?
That's total vacancies. I'd have to get you the exact number. Ms. Logan-Ford, you don't have the exact number in patrol today, do you?
I don't have the exact numbers, but I can provide that response back to the committee.
The 100 that we're sending down, how many of those are online officers would be out on patrol or would actually be administrative positions? What kind of level of officers are we sending?
We do have that breakdown.
Yes, sir.
Provide the breakdown.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilmember Larson, would you like it broke down by rank or where they are coming from within the agency?
I'd mostly like to know whether we're losing people on patrol is what I'd like to know.
Yes.
For those 4 days. If we have 100 of our officers down in Charlotte, how are we filling those holes, particularly if we're already short 30 or so officers in cars?
Yes, sir. We are sending exactly 25 patrol officers.
Okay.
The other 75 officers are coming from the specialty unit, the Court Services Bureau, and the Investigative Services Bureau. So we're talking about 25 line officers.
25 line officers, and they're coming from the 3 divisions?
They're coming from the 3 districts across the city. Yes, sir.
Right. Split out.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Well, if we could make sure that the PPE is being handled particularly. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember
Yes, sir.
Larson. And, Captain Weaver, I just want to be clear. We have sent officers down to the DNC, and this is sort of calling it both ways. We do have the ability to recall officers if there is a public emergency back home, so we're able to protect home and then make sure we're playing it both ways. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. You're correct all the way around.
Okay, Councilmember Larson, have your questions been satisfied?
I've got my answers. Thank you.
I look to you for a motion then, sir.
I think Councilmember Adams wanted to say something.
Oh, Councilmember Adams, please forgive me. You recognize.
Thank you, Chair. To build on what the chair said about 2012, he's right. I was there in Charlotte for that convention, and it was amazing to run into our police officers just about on every corner block. And we weren't the only ones there. As was stated, it's an agreement. There are police officers from all over the country. If you can imagine when there's a convention, a political convention, a block, there might be 10 to 15 police officers in that one block on both sides of the street. And that's to protect not only the attendees, the VIPs that are there, but the citizens as well. Councilmember Larson, I can disclose to many of you that the DNC convention is being looked at as well as to whether it is even going to happen in a up close and personal. I would be surprised if either one of those conventions take place in person in Milwaukee or Charlotte, because right now we've had our county conventions, our district convention is this Saturday, and our state convention is in June. And both parties, they are all being done virtually with more attendance than we had even in person. So again, I would just be surprised at the end of the summer that we have those conventions that have 55 to 80,000 people just show up. So.
And Councilmember Adams, to your point, I just want to take a moment. I think we all will agree and just thank all of our first line responders, the emergency folks who are out every single day on the front lines, whether that's at the convention or at the front door of our homes. So thank you for what you're doing to keep us safe during these times. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Councilwoman Scipio.
Yes, I just wanted to add that I believe this is a wonderful example of how cities work together. It's not just us alone in many things. We work together as cities across this nation, sharing ideas and sharing service and coming together when there's an actual need. This is what America is about. And so I love the fact that we are participating in this and that our representatives will also have their own equipment. Their cars will be visible, and it just reinforces what we are about as a nation and as a state and as a community, that we are giving people.
Agreed. Thank you, Councilwoman Scipio. I recognize Councilmember Larson for the motion.
Move approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Councilmember McIntosh. Councilmember McIntosh for the vote.
Aye.
Councilmember Larson.
Yes.
The item C3 is approved. Thank you. This moves us to the general agenda. There are 2 items on the general agenda, so we will read item G1. Madam Secretary, if you would do so, please.
Information regarding the Department of Justice, Bureau of Justice Assistance, Coronavirus Emergency Supplemental Funding Grant, recommended expenditures.
Members of the council, this item was discussed and pulled from the consent agenda on finance. Just for the sake of those who might be watching the publication, I'd like Ms. Newman just to give us a brief presentation, and then we'll move forward to the committee for a vote. Ms. Newman, if you're with us, you recognize, please, ma'am.
Councilmember Taylor, this item is relative to a grant that's being applied for the police department. So I would like to ask Councilmember, Police Chief Katrina Thompson if she would present this item, please.
Thank you, Assistant City Manager, for Chief Thompson. My apologies.
No problem. Thank you. Good evening, Chairman Taylor and members of the committee.
Good evening.
This item here is part of a federal government CARES Act passed by Congress to assist with the response to the novel coronavirus pandemic. The Department of Justice, Bureau of Justice Assistance has made available for fiscal year 2020 Coronavirus Emergency Supplemental Funding Program, a grant solicitation. The grant is based on a formula, and based on that formula, the city of Winston-Salem is allocated an amount of $523,520. That's $523,520. The funds can be used for any purpose related to preventing, preparing for, and responding to the coronavirus. There is no matching requirement for the city for this grant. Eligible expenditures must be incurred as a direct result of the coronavirus. And this is per the Department of Justice guidelines. The funds may not be used to supplant current funds, nor can they be used to offset lost revenues. With this funding, the Winston-Salem Police Department is proposing to use the $523,520 to cover expenses that I will discuss with you in more detail. Those expenses include laptop computers to be used for teleworking, Lexisnexis reporting system, Street Smart for COVID-19 tracking, personal protective equipment, and response team equipment for civil disorder. I will break down each one of those, and if you have questions, we'll field those as well.
Please continue.
So when it comes to the laptop computers, at this point, these laptops are required to facilitate teleworking for several of our civilian employees, and thus efficiently practicing social distancing while continuing to perform these duties safely from their homes. This also provides additional space at the police facilities that allow for those officers or those employees who must come into work to be able to adequately use social and practice social distancing. Presently, personnel that are using the laptops to telework are using laptops that have been allocated for our police trainees that are currently serving in BLET Class 75. The trainees will graduate at the end of the summer, and at that time will need those computers, which means that the employees that are teleworking will not have computers available to do their working from home. Lexisnexis. The Lexisnexis is a desk officer reporting system. The Lexisnexis Desk Officer Reporting System, or DORs, is a system that the agency has recently been evaluating to enhance the overall efficiency and effectiveness of the agency. The recent pandemics, of course, sped up the need for us to delve deeper into the Lexisnexis software system. It allows for social distancing, and it has upgraded the need, as I said, for the system. The reporting system allows for non-emergency inbound calls to be routed to the desk officer reporting system web application, providing individuals with an instant access to Winston-Salem Police Department customized non-emergency incident reporting website, while freeing up staff to respond to emergency calls for service in the field. Community members have the ability to file reports, crime tips, and other incidents through our secure online reporting system. The system supports multiple languages, while agency personnel can review the reports in English. This, of course, provides a tremendous benefit to our non-English speaking citizens in our city. Most importantly, all of these services can be provided without the need to have face-to-face contact, thus reducing the risk of community spread. Again, it enhances our ability to maintain social distancing. Law enforcement officers will not have to have face-to-face contact, which protects both our employees and our citizens. Street Smart COVID-19 tracking. The Street Smart tracking provides real-time data to keep employees up to date, informed, and most importantly, protected as they patrol our city. Officer-driven to provide essential facts about incidents and crime patterns in a specific area. Street Smart goes above and beyond the standard computer-aided dispatch and record management systems search by supplying up-to-the-minute data feeds, maps, discussions, bulletins, and case management tools. It is browser accessible on any Android or iOS device and mobile computer terminals in our patrol cars. This feature is significant for detectives who may not be issued a laptop. They have the ability to share investigative information quickly to patrol officers on the street. It is used as both internal method of communication and external method of communications with the regional deployment. These are features which will be valuable during COVID outbreaks and other pandemics to help protect, ensure officer safety, but also, and equally as important, is to keep our community safe. This is an officer safety tool, and it can help with the tracking and keeping officers safe in COVID-19 highly dense areas. It also helps us when it comes to dispatch for fire and EMS, as our agency currently is one of the few agencies left in the state that dispatch both for police and fire calls. Then, of course, personal protective equipment. We're talking about masks, to include N95 masks and other facial masks, hand sanitizers, latex gloves, biohazard response kits, disinfectant spray, as well as disinfectant wipes. And then civil disobedience response team equipment. Based on evidence that we've seen in Raleigh and in other cities and states, civil disorder or civil disobedience against shelter-in-place orders have posed major safety risks to civilians, government officials, and law enforcement, whether through the threat of violence or simply through potential exposure to COVID-19 via large crowds assembling. Law enforcement has been called to respond to these incidents to ensure the WSPD is prepared to protect its civil disobedience response team. Outdated equipment must be replaced so that it can be up to code. This equipment includes shields, barricades, gloves, passive protective tools, flex cuffs, helmets, shin guard protectors, gas mask carriers, gas mask filters, magnum foggers, and magnum fogger carriers. When we break down the total for the expenses, the laptops is $50,600. LexisNexis reporting system, $89,330. Street Smart, $165,000. Our PPEs, $187,000. And the response team equipment, $31,590, for a total of $523,520. That concludes my presentation, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thanks for the detailed presentation, Chief. And as you mentioned, this is a non-matching grant, and you have certainly outlined what the dollars will be used for. So we certainly appreciate that. I'll go to Councilman Larson, and then we'll go next, I see, to Councilmember Scipio. Mr. Larson, you got the floor.
Yes, Chief Thompson, this is brilliant. Really appreciate the work that you're putting on this. Do we have a schedule for the awarding of this grant, this money, or is it already in our pocket?
Councilmember Larson, I think that it's not already in our pocket, but I think the funding has already been allocated. I actually had some of my fellow chiefs from across the state to contact me to notify me that we had this funding and wanted to know how we were able to get as much funding as allocated to us as we have. At the end of the day, I think the money has already been allocated, and if I'm not mistaken, we as a city just have to articulate, as I just did in the presentation, what the funding would be for and show that it has a direct correlation to or relation to our response to COVID-19.
I think you've made a very strong case for that, and I think it's an excellent piece of work. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Larson. And just for the record, I want the team to know that this is an informational item, so we just want to provide the information, so no vote is necessary because it is happening. And I recognize Councilwoman Scipio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question was actually answered, that we just have to apply for the grant. It's already been appropriated to us. We just have to formalize it. So go forward, Chief.
All right, Chief, you heard that. Thank you. Is there anything else before we move forward to the next item? Thank you. That completes item G1. Item G2, please.
Good evening, Councilmember Taylor and other members of Public Safety Committee.
Good evening.
This item is an information item only. It is an ordinance that was drafted at the request of Councilmember Taylor. It's called the Housing Justice Act, which applies to housing and residential projects receiving city funds only. The first component of the Housing Justice Act prohibits discrimination against an applicant or tenant or occupant based upon his or her criminal record, with certain exceptions. Those exceptions relating to communication of threats and violent acts. The second component of the Justice Act, Housing Justice Act, relates to or prohibits discrimination on the basis of sources of income. Essentially, those developers providing housing with the use of city funds would be prohibited from discriminating against applicants, tenants, and occupants based upon their source of income. For example, the fact that they get a housing voucher or receive SSI or some of the other sources of income that are listed in the draft ordinance. The last component of the Housing Justice Act would basically increase the affordable housing or workforce housing requirement for projects receiving city funds. The current requirement is 10%. So the draft would increase the current requirement from 10% to 20%. So those are basically the three components of the Housing Justice Act. And I'll turn it over to Councilmember Taylor.
Well, thank you, Madam Attorney. I will just say to the members of the committee and the council, this is joint legislation that Councilmember Adams and I are both sort of working on. As you're aware, unemployment in this country has reached Great Depression levels, and local governments all across the country, particularly in the state of North Carolina, are going to have to figure out how we can be creative as to how we provide quality, affordable housing going forward. You are aware that the city went to the voters and asked for their approval, and we won the ability to set aside $10 million for affordable housing in the city of Winston-Salem going forward. So I think Councilman Adams and I have a good idea, and hopefully you'll approve this. But there are three components to the Housing Justice Act. You've heard all three, but we've been working with the local and regional association of realtors, programs like SOAR. We've ran it by some folks with the Affordable Housing Coalition, and everybody understands that this is something that we should be looking at. Affordable housing will be a huge issue post-COVID-19. We've got to get out in front and make sure we're doing what's right. So I'll pause for the calls and see if there are any questions, and we'll just sort of take them on directly. The three components will be based off criminal background. The second one would be based off the resident's sources of income. And then third, it would be the 20% for affordable housing versus 10%. So is there any member of the committee who wishes to have a conversation about either three of those components? Councilwoman Scipio.
Yeah, I just have one other, I have several questions, but I was wondering, some of the numbers, are they there because we've looked at other cities who've taken this approach and that's why we have those percents? My specific concern was that an affordable housing project must set aside for a period of at least 10 years from the receipt of city funds. I don't know if that's just a small number of years. Seems like there should be more of a commitment than 10. As a, 10s is not that, it's quick. So I just wondered if some of the numbers that went into it were based on what other cities were doing.
Would you like me to respond?
Yeah, okay.
Please.
In terms of the percentages, it was my understanding from Councilmember Taylor, he wanted to see the percentages increase from the current number, which is 10% to 20%. And certainly he was flexible and wanted to discuss that with the committee members. In terms of the 10 years, the current term is 15 years, but because the percentage was increasing from 10 to 20, we thought that perhaps 10 years might be a little bit more reasonable, but that's certainly up for discussion as well.
And I just want to be clear, these again are projects that will be using city funding. And it made sense for me to say that if a developer builds 10 units, that 2 of those units would be used. I know Councilmember Adams would agree, 2 of those units will be used for affordable housing out of 10. So the breakdown of the 20% will be 5% of the total units will be leased to households whose incomes are 50 to 80% of the area median income. And then the second part of it is 15% of those units will be leased to households whose incomes are at 80 to 120% of the area median income. So it gives us a wide variety of ranges from $18,650 to $44,900. So everybody has an opportunity to get housing in the city of Winston-Salem. What we don't want to do is create a situation where communities are being gentrified, or when people pay into the system, they're not able to reap the benefits from the system in lieu of affordable housing. So I'm going to pause and see if I missed anything that Councilmember Adams might want to add.
Chair Taylor, the only thing, thank you very much. Thank you for putting forth this resolution for this ordinance. The one thing that I want us to be cognizant of is, we are connected to For Everyone's Home and Grounded Solution, and we got choice neighborhoods coming. We got purpose built. We got irons in the fire. We just haven't built the fire yet. And the one thing that we keep hearing from all over the country is that the longevity of the affordability.
Yeah.
There are a lot of talk in other cities, Charlotte, Durham, San Antonio, whereas and I know we're trying to strike a happy medium. I would ask that the city attorney or give me a chance with Ms. Newman, Marla, and others to check on what is the average for a city our size, because what's happening is the affordability is expiring. And the landlords the developers and landlords see an opportunity, as you've listed in the report, that they're renting to the people that can pay the highest dollar.
Right.
And that's where you get the gentrification and poor people not being able to stay in their neighborhoods. So I think it's a great document, well written, but I definitely would like to look at again the average affordability throughout the country, because that seems to be the one that's rising to the top in the housing industry right now, affordable.
And Councilmember McIntosh, I'm going to come to you, but I will say we've got to look at the numbers. I think Councilmember Adam, your point is well taken. I just want to add that an unintended consequence that we tend to create, and this is one of the reasons why this is also in public safety, is folks who have criminal backgrounds sometimes are being excluded from being able to get adequate, quality, affordable housing. Now, we do understand that sometimes everybody doesn't want to live beside everybody, and I get that. But I think everybody deserves a right to have a quality place to live. Now, this particular ordinance would eliminate non-violent offenses only. So people who have convictions on communicating threats or convictions on violent acts, we'd still be able to regulate that. But folks who had non-violent offenses, and they changed the ages, where an adult now would be 18 in North Carolina. They've raised the age. So there's so many factors here, and we don't want to create a permanent underclass of people who might have felonies or misdemeanors on their record. They can't find places to stay. Councilmember McIntosh.
Yeah, you brought up something that I think is a real good thing to look at, and that's I just want to make sure this gets vetted so that we don't have unintended consequences. Housing market it's a complicated thing. We don't want to do something that could potentially discourage developers from providing spaces. The other thing is, going forward, I mean, who knows what the housing market's going to be like from a developer standpoint? How many new projects we're going to see? And frankly, we've gotten to the point where in Winston-Salem, we haven't had to prime the pump very much with city money. The private market has been providing that. We just had the announcement the other day of the new project in Dee Dee's ward up on the corner of MLK and Trade. There are 244 units. So, I mean, I'm hoping that we get to participate in some of these. I would like to see a report from the Affordable Housing Coalition just to make sure that they think that this is not going to have negative impacts or impacts that we don't anticipate.
Can I make
one? Yeah, please.
I was going to say the ordinance does contain a provision that says the city in its sole and absolute discretion may relax the aforementioned requirements if the proposed financing plan will not support the percentages set forth above, getting to Councilmember McIntosh's concerns with it.
Yeah, we could relax some of the provisions if necessary, Councilmember McIntosh. And I also want to let you know that I have been in communication with the Affordable Housing Coalition. Now, they haven't been able to meet due to COVID-19, but one of the chairpersons has the legislation. I've also ran the legislation by Mr. John McPherson, who you're familiar with the Realtors Association, and also with Ms. Kathy Robinson. I've been able to review those with her as well. And all of them seem to be in support. It makes sense. So I think that's something that the council should consider. Councilmember Larson.
Yes, there's really two parts to this proposal that I see. One deals with eligibility to rent or occupy spaces and making sure we're not discriminating against certain conditions, whether it be a criminal record or where the money's coming from to pay the rent. Those are straightforward, and I think they're clear, and there's certainly provisions in there to protect the public and what have you with all of that. I think those are fine. I am a little less clear on the second part of this, which deals with establishing thresholds of percentages for certain levels of occupancy in projects that are funded in part by the city. I think we have to remember that if there's no city money involved in this, that in fact, this doesn't apply to anybody else. So I think we can keep that in mind. I am kind of curious as to the thresholds that are being established. I mean, I've always thought the 80% threshold sort of a valid point to say whether or not how involved we might be in a subsidized housing project. I mean, we just looked at one in my ward, 15 minutes ago that has a whole range of percentages in it. And I'm a little concerned, I guess, about building the box too strong, that we don't have a little bit of flexibility as to occupancy of subsidized or support workforce housing. And I think I would go back, maybe I understand what Dee Dee was asking for, and that is I would like to kind of understand industry-wide whether or not these percentages seem to be valid in other municipalities of our size. I think in principle, what we're saying is if we're putting public money into a project, we want to make sure it provides equal housing for all the citizens in Winston-Salem. And I think that's a very valid goal. The only thing I'm a little concerned about is memorializing or codifying a percentage that may in fact have consequences that ultimately we don't want to have written in that hard. And if we could make sure before we make this law that we have enough room, like in the legal part for criminal concerns, there's clearly room to maneuver. There's clearly room to maneuver as far as, we have this as well, perhaps. But I want to be a little more clear on that. I'm ready to vote on first two. But a third one, I do have a little bit more concern on, a little time to be spent on that one.
Okay.
What we can do, Council, go ahead, Madam Attorney.
I was going to say, it's an information item only, so we can get some additional information.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, we can get some information to you, is exactly what I was going to say, Councilmember Larson, but I think the development that we just voted on in the South Ward, the majority of that development was going to be for moderate to low-income individuals or handicapped or senior citizens. But what we don't want is to create an apartment complex or a housing development where we use city dollars. And you look at it, and it looks like some of the places downtown. It just doesn't look. We know that people who live there are not moderate to low-income individuals. Let me say that. I'm choosing my words extremely carefully. But we know that. So I think people in this city should get to live anywhere they want to. They should not be relegated to one side of town, one side of the community. They should be able to live anywhere. But if we say, I understand that 20% is pushing the envelope. But again, it is reasonable to say that if a developer builds 10 apartments, that 2 of those should be used for moderate to low income individuals. I think sometimes we have to be a little outside of the box and we have to apply pressure if we in fact want to make sure we are providing quality affordable housing.
Mr. Chairman, I think I was just questioning the 515 percentages is what I was looking at.
Understood.
There's a percentage in there to work with. I just don't know whether we draw the lines 5 and 15 and the ratio of the values that you've assigned to them. That's
yes, sir.
Well,
that's something that we can and will work on when it comes back to the committee for consideration. It will also go to Housing General Government, and we should try to have that worked out by then. Councilmember McIntosh.
Yeah, just John brought up threshold, and that raised the question I thought about earlier. Is this going forward going to be if there's any money, any city money in, or is it a significant amount? Or I mean, does there need to be a threshold there or not? I don't know that I think there is, but if it's, if we're putting sidewalks in or something, does that kick it into a category where it's city funds being used? I'm just curious if Madam Attorney had any thoughts about that.
Is any amount of city funds actually being used for the generation of the housing itself? So if it's $1 going to build the housing, then yes, it would apply. But certainly if the committee wants to say a particular amount or threshold, that's up to the committee.
Yeah, I hadn't really thought about that, so I want to have some discussions there. Okay, thank you.
We can evaluate threshold, we can evaluate percentages, but overall, it sounds like that the general consensus of the council and the committee is to move forward with discussions on the Housing Justice Act, and we'll fine tune it when it comes back to the committee for consideration. Is that the appropriate response that I've heard? Does anyone else wish to be heard at this time? Seeing no one, that completes item G2, which completes the both general and consent agendas for the Public Safety Committee. Is there any other business that should be considered for the good of the order? If there are no further business, we'll consider this meeting to be adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.